SCP-035's command.
Hello, Dr. Long here. Today we'll be going over some tales for SCP-035. The first one is called Addressing the Second, and it's tagged with both SCP-035 and SCP-682.
Lord Ubris sits opposite Lord Wisdom. He is of type Cathar, and his symbol is the crown. To his right is the unknowable, which is invisible and colorless only to him, as he refuses to look upon it. To his left is the courageous, which is always a right thorn in the side as he refuses to concern himself with it. Betwixt and the wise are needy and unworthy, and he spits upon them with his belly acid because he believes he is above them. Divites tell us he will never die, for their book's end does not include him. Believe or disbelieve them as you wish. Lord Ubris is of great cunning. It is said that with enough time, he could always sway the Council of Equity into his favor. His strength is like that of 100 men, but he never need exercise it, for his voice is the greatest weapon. He appeals to the heart of man so that in the depths of battle, they will switch to his side. The face of Lord Hubris is unassailable, for to look into his eyes and hear his voice sways his enemy's allegiance. Lord Hubris is deceptive and manipulative, and only Lord Wisdom is perfectly immune to his tricks. Despite that, he is always able to be on the side of the betrayer, and that he is always able to persuade the doubts of the knowledgeable. He is unable to change the opinion of the wise. Lord Ubris is of great endurance. It is said that he can be cut in twains. His headless half will come alive to struggle with him. When in combat, even as his mortal foe strikes the blade into his flesh, he shrugs them off and speaks to them. Even when there are those who are particularly stubborn, the swatch of his claw will steal their fate away from them. Lord Hubris boasts that all Epsi that are able none can beat him in battle, and as none can beat him in battle, as he will outlast them always. Is a position the wise is unending and unyielding, for he believes Daiva that he will live forever. He believes he can sully the Lord Wisdom's reputation such that other 10 members of the council turn against the Lord Wisdom and grant Lord Hubris his victory. Sterile laments. Lord Hubris has the face of a ghost, but made with stone. It is like the whiteness of salt, but as hard as rock. He does not speak of his mouth, for his words pierce into the mind of those he speaks to. It is said that the only time Lord Hubris changes expression are in the memory of those who have spoken to him. The neck of Lord Hubris is long and sinewy, so that his face may always look into the face of which he is speaking to. Lord Hubris sheds blasphemy from his skin like sweat, and so, to keep his face far from his body, muffles the whispers of disgust. His talons are innumerable and smeared with the flesh of those who did not follow him. As he is a wrathful lord, he spits the black blood, and those who touch it are burned by it, And when enraged, the drool of Lord Hubris is said to come alive and form words in the drops it leaves underground. Our elder twilights have told us that the Lord of Hubris exists always, but has not always been as he is today. In a time long before ours, he was instead two things, but has since become one: a visage made of porcelain, worn by the ancient Tarask.
The second one is called Midnight Parade, and it's only tied with 035. That's gonna be the last one we're gonna see today. I'll see you folks in the next one.
At midnight, two men met under the dim light of a back alley, away from the crowds and their watchful eyes. Dark stars shone weakly in the sky. One of them was dressed in fine clothes, and yet he covered all the jewels he wore with a thick black cloak. The other one also wore a black cloak, and appeared nervous. He occasionally glanced at the main road, making sure that no one paid them any attention. One of them, with luxurious ornaments here and there, spoke in a deep voice. It echoed in the dark alley, even though the man wasn't speaking particularly loudly.
I need to get out of the city.
But Lord, the other one replied, his voice a bit shaky. The other lords...
The lords are going to stand by. They are long been jealous of my status and are more than willing to be rid of me.
His master interrupted him. His voice was cold and harbored hatred.
Did you get the gate key?
Yes, yes! The other one quickly took out the key from under his cloak and handed it to him. It was a black metal key, which smelled faintly of burnt flesh. His lord held the key between his long fingers. The ring of obsidian and porcelain he wore shone dimly under the street light. The constant frown on his face relieved slightly as he examined the key carefully. He handed it back to the servant. My lord, the servant continued, you could appeal to the king. You are
I'm always his favorite, and that's exactly why they would not let me live,
the lord answered, as if in agonizing pain.
The ambassadors do not wish to see the king rise to his power, and without my aid, the king would remain helpless. There are chains around his neck and spikes on his throne. He cannot help me no more than he can help himself.
The servants still attempted to say something, but they were interrupted by a noise coming from the main road. They heard footsteps, not of a person, but of many people thundering down the street. The parade is coming, the servant said, terrified.
I need to get out of the city,
the lord repeated. What can I do for you, my lord? The servant's voice trembled. The light above them began to flicker. The lord looked at him and said nothing. He held up his finger, suddenly started digging them into his flesh. The long, polished nails he kept, now stained with blood, dug deeply under the skin. Dark red streams now covered his pale hands, along with the fine rings on them. He proceeded to tear the flesh out violently. The light flickered wildly. The footsteps were coming near. In a moment, the Lord took off his pale face and held it up in his hands. Dark blood streamed down his neck and disappeared into the cloak. The servant started to tremble. He breathed heavily, heart pounding violently. He did not run.
Put it on,
the face whispered. The footsteps were very close now. The servant took the white porcelain face with his shaky hands to put it up against his own, like a mask. He did not scream. The footsteps had arrived. People with various masks and wide smiles could be seen afar on the main road. The face landed safely on its new body. Black, corrosive liquid streamed down the servant's eye sockets and mouth. He was still trembling, but quickly turned to run with all the strength he could get from his corrupting body away from the parade. The ambassador is here! Someone shouted. The crowd made a sharp turn and swarmed into the back alley with a dim light. In the middle of the crowd was the ambassador, standing above all others, leading the
Parade arrogantly.
There was laughter emitted from every masked being. They parade with their best clothes on, with their rings and necklaces around their fingers and necks. With bottles in hand and the sane world forgotten, the revelry was unstoppable, and they all screamed in wild joy. The ambassador did not laugh. The Lord's old body, with dark blood all over him, still stood in the dark alley. The crowd closed in and easily stamped on him. The sound of bone cracking was overwhelmed by the sound of singing and laughing from the parade. The fine clothes the Lord wore soon became dusted and torn, and the ring of obsidian and porcelain were shattered into pieces. There is no scream, but even if there was, it could not be heard. The ambassador watched this for a while, then he turned to leave. The parade continues, now spreading all over the city of Alagada. But somewhere, away from the thundering parade, a man was running. He was a servant, but a servant no more. He was a lord, but a lord no more. When the crowd stepped on his old body, he burst into laughter. The eternal anguished look on his fine porcelain face disappeared. He was now smiling, with mouth wide and black liquid dripping from his face. He laughed and laughed as he held the burnt key firmly in his hand.